welcome to you all today. There's lots of you here, and I know that you're all eager to get started in your probation year after the summer. I know from my own personal experience that it is quite a stressful time for some people, and a lot of mixed emotions about it also. Hopefully today, Donna and I can put some of that to ease for you. But just to introduce myself, my name is Gillian Stephen. I am the Twinkl Scotland Primary Segment Manager, which means I sort of just make sure anything that's been created within Twinkl Scotland is reaching all the right people, and kind of seeing where we've got gaps and what we want to do next. I've been with Twinkl for a good few years now, but I did go back to teaching for 2 years just in the last teaching session before returning to Twinkl. But all in all, I've got about 12 years teaching experience under my belt, and plenty other within Twinkl as well. And I'm joined today by Donna, and I'll let Donna introduce herself as well.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Donna Clark, and I am a current primary school teacher in Scotland. I've been teaching for 16 years now, graduated 2009 from University of Strathclyde, Jordan Hill. And yeah, I love primary teaching, best job in the world. You're going to really enjoy yourselves. I've taught all across the different stages, primary 1 through to primary 7. I'm currently in primary 1, and yeah, looking forward to today's session.
Excellent. So I've got here, I'll just change the slides for us just now, just to let you see. Oh, it's not letting me do it for some reason. There we go. This is our agenda for tonight. We'll try and keep 2 times as best we can, but we're actually doing not too bad so far. I'm splitting it into sort of 10-minute increments, and we will start with just kind of what we've already introduced ourselves. Then we'll have a look at classroom setup. So when you actually get into your classroom and you find out exactly what schools you're in, some of you might not know that yet, how you're going to go about setting up your room. Then we'll discuss what happens in those first few crucial days with your new class. And then for getting a little bit deeper, if you maybe find out you have a composite class, or like every class has mixed ability. I like to think that every class is pretty much a composite class. Might all be primary 4, but not everybody's working at the same level. So looking at that mixed ability ranges, and then we will finish off with the daily structures and routines, talking about some planning and assessment, and then we'll finish off with your questions. But if we can get further ahead, it's always good, because Donna and I are known to like a chat, so we might get a bit carried away. But please do feel free to pop any questions in the chat. We'll try and answer as we're going, but if not, we've got plenty of time at the end. So it's just not letting me change slides with the click, but there we go. So we've introduced ourselves. So if you could just take a few minutes to either pop in the chat, or if you've got a pen and paper, if you want to write down 2 things that you're looking forward to in your probation year, and maybe just 1 thing that you're apprehensive about. As I say, you can either share that with us or just write that as something for yourself. But I'll just maybe start off by talking a little bit about my teaching journey as well, because I really just mentioned Twinkl. I live up in the northeast, so I have been teaching within Aberdeen City and within Aberdeenshire. Again, like Donna, I've had a range of stages. My most recent experience was in primary 2. We were kind of mixed between a play-based classroom and a more traditional setting. We started off traditional and then tried to move into the more play-based, which I know might be something that people want to know more about tonight. But yeah, that's kind of it. But I am going to move just on. So you can write down what you want, or you can pop it in. It's completely up to you. But if we just get started with the classroom setup. So what about you, Donna? Where do you sit on the classroom setup? A big question that's always asked is, do you go neutral or is it colourful? What would you like?
It's such a huge decision, isn't it? I always think that it's really important that your classroom is comfortable, because you're going to be spending an awful lot of time there. It has to be inviting for the children. You want them to come in and go, "Oh, this looks like a really fun place to learn," but it also has to be functional. And for me, I fall down on the neutrals. I like a calm classroom. I prefer it to be lots of wood effect, lots of kind of grass. I've got these working walls in my classroom, and I use the the tablecloths that you get from, the vinyl tablecloths, they work so much better for your backing paper rather than having to keep changing the backing paper, but they're so neutral, it's really calming. I work in primary 1 right now, so I have things like a water tray set up and sand area, all these things set up in the classroom. And having the neutral theme just brings down that level of chaos a little bit. I do remember when I was a probationer, though, everything was colourful. I loved rainbow, the colour was everywhere. I actually really loved that first classroom that I had. But as I've grown into teaching, as I've grown into the role, I do find for myself a more neutral theme is more calming for the children. But there's no right or wrong. Everyone has their own ideas about what they want.
Absolutely. And I think it depends also on like the school you're in. I was in one school where there just wasn't a budget really to have all this beautifully Pinterest perfect classroom, and it was a case of whatever's in the cupboard you can use. And it wasn't always because I actually went into the last school that I was in a bit later in the term, and it was difficult for me to find anything that did match or looked really pretty. And unless you're going to spend a fortune of your own money, which we don't recommend at this stage in your career, that you would end up just sort of putting things up as you go. But there's lots of different things that you can use and making it your own space. I think it's really important though not to over plan your classroom just now before you've met your class. Children, in my experience, I think they react better when the classroom space is seen as their own. So if they are involved in creating spaces, creating the working walls and it being their work that's on it, we don't just want this Pinterest perfect classroom because that's not real life. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, and the classroom should be very responsive to the needs of the children as well. So if you have a class that potentially you might have a flexible learning space, but maybe it's just not working for the needs of those children and you need to go back to a more structured space, or vice versa, it's too structured and they need more space to not run around. I don't want running around, but you know what I mean? You want more space for them to be flexible and to move around different areas. So you need to have a very responsive space for the children that are in front of you. And you're not going to know that until you've got them there and you've had a chance to get to know them and you've built those relationships. So I wouldn't go ahead and buy lots of things for your classroom. And as tempting as it is, because you don't know what's there already. You don't know what policies your school has in place already as well, depending on what their priorities are. And you want to make sure that the space works for both you and the children.
Yes, we've just been asked if MD, I've lost the question now, it was right there, where'd it go? If you have any advice for somebody who's never been in a primary 1 to 3 classroom.
All I can say is, for that very quickly, I did 16 years I've been teaching. I hadn't taught a primary 1 properly until last year, and that was coming off of 8 years in primary 7. So we're always learning. Everyone is always learning. Lean on your colleagues, lean on the people that are around you. They are the wealth of advice that you're going to need, and they're going to want you to ask those questions. Your probation year is for learning. No one's expecting you to come in and know everything straight away. Use your colleagues, ask them for advice, and trust that process.
Absolutely, I would agree. And that was generally just a question of, do you have advice for somebody who has never been in primary 1 to 3 but going into early and first level? And I think even if you haven't had that experience, even if you've been up the school for longer, you're still going to have had experience of children who were working within that level. A lot of places are now going much more play driven, which is something I'm quite passionate about myself. I see the benefit of both. I see the benefit of a more traditional classroom setup and also having that kind of playful learning and free play involved as well. I would go with the interests of your class as well. Once you get to know them, make sure that you're kind of following their lead where you can and where it's relevant and possible. It's much easier said than done. It can be very challenging to really ensure that what you're setting up is quality learning experience and you've not just made a tough tray that looks pretty for the first 10 minutes of the day and then it's completely Yes, there's one within a few minutes. But yeah, so just thinking about, like, we've put continuous provision here as something as well, but having something around the room set up so that's meaningful and purposeful for your classroom. But that's not just in early years.
No.
Local learning is really taking off across the school now. There's some excellent accounts that you can follow on different social media. We have a lot of our own. We've got ambassadors, which is what Donna is, one of our Twinkl ambassadors, and shares things that she gets up to in her classroom. We've got Nicholas, who is teaching in Technicolor, and some of the things that he shares are also fantastic. And Ailey, Miss Mac P123, but I think I've got that the wrong way around. Again, these people are also sharing really interesting ways to have your classroom being that bit more active, and ways that works and how they implement it into a different classroom. I would also recommend Mr. Minchin. I think he's got some fantastic ideas as well. We've mentioned here flexi seating and static seating. Where do you sit on that one, Donna? I don't.
Well, when I had primary 7, it was always flexi seating. So the kids would come in, and instead of me telling them where to sit, they were able to go and sit where they wanted to sit, on the understanding that there was a responsibility there, that they were working, they were not messing around, getting on with their job. I think primary, especially your upper school pupils, they really thrive on that level of responsibility. They like the idea that they're preparing for secondary school and that they are being treated more like young adults. With the younger ones, so I started off this year, I didn't have set seats because I only had 2 tables. The rest of the room was set up like a playroom. So the children would come to the tables to do group work or to do a specific activity that was on a tabletop. That very quickly, again, flexibility, needed to adapt to the needs of the children. We ended up having to bring more tables in for a more structured environment, just because that was the needs of the children at the time. For me, I think there's a place for both. Flex seating is great, but it can make your life more difficult. Again, if you don't know the children very well, you might want to start off with some static seating so everyone's got their space, and then build in a level of flexibility as you move through the year. I was going to say as well, it's important what you're saying about continuous provision, how it's not just for your infant classes, but also for your upper classes. Building in those extra spaces in your class really ups that level of invitation. So like library spaces, cam corners. I had a tent in my classroom this year that the kids absolutely loved to go to when they were just feeling that they needed a wee bit of quiet space. For your upper school, fast finisher shelves, things like spelling resources, maths resources, community supplies that they can come and help themselves to whenever they want to. Again, that builds that level of responsibility for the children, that they know where everything is and they can go and help themselves to it. And that really helps as well as we get further into our presentation, where we're talking about adaptive learning and differentiation. The kids can go and help themselves to the resources if they know where they are and they're on display, they've got a set area of the classroom they can use, then that helps to facilitate that differentiation.
Yeah, and I think that kind of mixes in with what we'll talk about later as well. In those first few days, it's training, and it's not just with your littlest ones as well. It's a new learning environment for everyone, yourself and the children. It's their first time in your classroom. I always say to them, it's not my classroom, it's our classroom, and they are as responsible as I am for making sure that things go back where they were when they finish. And honestly, this sounds so basic and so simple, but oh my goodness, if that training isn't in place in the first few weeks of term and everything's just all over the shop, then it really
pen lids in the library corner, stuffed in behind books. You're like, where did this pen lid come from? It's training. Training's important.
Or you started off the year and everyone had their own whiteboard pens and they were all perfect, and then by week 3 you're down to 5 in the classroom, and blue tack disappears at a rate of absolute knots no matter what school you're in. I don't know what it is with blue tack, but it just goes.
They can make it into slime. I think that's what it is. They can make it into slime, so they like to peel it off the wall and make it into slime. Oh, gads.
Lovely. I know. The same. It's delightful. Somebody has asked a question about those first few days in school, but we're actually going to come on to that in a few slides time, so I'll just leave it just now. And then we've been asked as well about establishing basic routines with primary ones. But again, that's a little bit later, so we will come back to these questions. But I'm going to move on. We're 4 minutes ahead of schedule, Donna, and I actually think good to go, which is not like us at all.
It's not like us.
First few days, but before we hit that, it's probably a good idea to talk about that first thing. I think it works quite well here. Some of you might be lucky enough to already know your school. I know there are local authorities where that's not the case. I'm pretty sure Aberdeenshire is notorious for being one of the last ones to know. And I think
it's the same down here, exact same down here.
Yes,
they don't think they know yet.
You don't always get into your class, or sometimes you will, but it's the last week of term and the children are hyper, and it's maybe not always the best time to meet them, but it's better than not meeting them at all. But if you do get into your classroom, I think it's important to build that, start building that relationship straight away. There's an old-fashioned saying that you go in like really strict up until October or November. That's never been me as a teacher. I don't like that. I do think it's important that you establish your boundaries and that you establish your class norms and things, and using things like building your class charter and things like that together is all really important. But that's obviously for the first few days. The first time you meet them, I would have depending on your stage, I would probably have a story ready, maybe a meet the teacher type thing, something all about me. Another thing I've done in the past is everybody made a birthday card, and then I put them all in an envelope, and then throughout the year you have like a class bank of birthday cards ready. But it's just a nice calm activity. Everyone's just sitting, making a card, colouring in, whilst you're able to go around and really talk to them. With younger children, I might have a story that kind of links me, might have a bag of things that tell them little bits about my personality, just that sort of thing, just a really get to know you session. You'll usually find that it'll be quite a short session. You won't have a long time with them when it's just a going in to meet them situation. You might be lucky enough to have teachers that are more than happy to have you in. But yeah, so it's a very classroom dependent. But that first few days can be really daunting. Years in, I still don't sleep very well the first night before going back to school, and it's a mix of excitement and that unknown. But yeah, I think what you want to do in that first few days is really get to start building those relationships. And I've mentioned classroom charters. I would, where I could, be linking these into the UNCRC, talking about children's rights, making them understand which ones are relevant in school and which ones aren't. When I had kind of middle and upper stages, I used to start with that. I would have all of the rights out on tables, and they would sort into which ones are really relevant for the class. They have them all the time, we know that, but rights about human trafficking don't really tend to come into the classroom environment. And can they sort that and then decide which ones we need to focus on within our classroom environment and how are they important? And that's obviously harder with your younger pupils, but when you're further up the school, they enjoy those conversations. What about you? What do you think is the first? What would you say in your first few days is the most important thing?
I completely agree with you with class charter. I always start with a class charter. With the younger ones, there's a great book from the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland. You can get it online, or you can apply to have one sent to your school. They're free, and it's a book designed for early level, and it's called "We All Have Rights." They also do it in a Scots version as well, and it's looking at children's rights in a really child-friendly way, suitable for young children, and it's a really good discussion tool to talk about what we have the right to learn, we have the right to play, and then we talk about what rights are important to them. And then usually we do like a handprint activity where they all create their handprint, and we get them dry, we cut them out, and we put them up on the wall. Or you can do like a wee art activity, colouring activity, just to give them a little bit of ownership of, well, these are the rights we had a discussion about, and these are our handprints to show we're all part of this classroom community. Definitely stories, always have lots of stories on hand. Another nice one for the middle school, if you want to look at rights, is one called the name jar, which is all about the right to a name. And it's a nice way to start off a bit of conversation about children's rights. And there's lots of art activities you can do looking at your name, whether it be like graffiti art, or they can look at the meaning of their name and create some kind of dream jar with things that are important to them. So those are two nice ones that I've done before. I would also say, do not do death by assessments in your first few weeks that you are in. It can be really tempting to try and sort out your spelling groups or your maths groups or writing groups or whatever other groups that your school has policies for. What I would say is that these children have not just turned up at school, they have been there previously or they've come up from the nursery. Trust your colleagues and the judgments that they have made, because they will have been doing assessments this term and they will have those assessments ready to pass on to you with the children's levels. Trust those judgments. See, for the first term, you don't need to be doing lots of assessments. Trust what's come before, and as you get to know the children, you'll then be able to make better judgments about the levels that they're at. I just always think sometimes kids, they come back after summer and the last thing they want to be doing is spelling tests and reading assessments and all these things. Just really focus on building those relationships. Lots of icebreakers, community builders. There was a really good one put up a couple of years back, and I think she still has it on, from Miss Feeney on Instagram, and it was a this and that activity, and she had it on the Promethean board, and the kids stand up and sit down depending on what their this and that was. I've done a scavenger hunt previously as well, where you're talking about getting to know the teacher. I did it in the playground, where you hide things belonging to you in the playground. They've got to go and find them and find out a bit more about their teacher. I've done QR code ones before as well in the classroom, or you can do a scavenger hunt around your classroom so they can find where the different things are in the class. It's a bit like getting to know your classroom rather than getting to know your teacher. Two truths and a lie, always classic. Class bingo, where they get to know each other, because you might have kids coming from two separate classes that are coming together. So you want to build that classroom community with the children as well. One thing I really enjoyed doing when I was in the upper school was allowing that space for pupil voice in the first few days. So I would bring in all the novels that I had considered for planning for the year, and say, right, what would you like to learn about? Which novels would you guys like to study? And giving them those options. Same with topics. What do they want to learn about? You'll probably find, and we'll get into this later when we talk about planning, there will be set outcomes that your school will expect you to be covering in your class. You're not expected to cover every single outcome every single year. There'll be set outcomes for your stage that they want you to cover, but how you choose to cover them, it can be really good to ask the children and get them to take the lead on what topics they want to learn. So you can put out big bits of sugar paper or flip chart and get them to mind map, right, we need to do a history topic. What history topics would you like to learn about, and get them to come up with their plan for the year, what they would like to do.
Again,
I talked a lot there.
No, I was saying that can depend on your school as well. You might have in your head something that you're really passionate about wanting to teach, but you'll go in and they'll say, well, actually in primary 5, they do still do X, Y, and Z. And that model is changing as the curriculum changes and as just the way education is going. That's not as set in stone, but there are still schools and local authorities that work that way. So just get to know the school that you're in before you spend hours planning something.
Don't plan till you've spoke to your school.
Yeah, don't do too much there. I think setting routines and boundaries is another really big one as well. How do you want them to come into your classroom every morning? Do you want to have like a check-in with them? You see all these things on social media. Are you going to fist bump? Are you going to high five? It's lovely. It's just a really nice welcoming start. And you could have children in your classroom who nobody's really interacted with yet that morning. They've got up, they've got themselves to school. They've not really interacted. Nobody's really made an effort to find out how they are yet that day. Or they're having a bad morning, and just having this thing that they can rely on every morning it's really lovely. And it also, you'll start off with kids who will probably not even give you eye contact, and it'll be a half-hearted fist bump, and within a few weeks they're choosing the double high five, or you'll have a secret handshake in place by then. But yeah, lots of different things like that.
I think it's so important to be that face at the door. You know, even if you don't want to do all the fancy fist bumping and hugs and high fives, if you just be that friendly face at the door to greet the kids in the morning, it's such a nice way of building that relationship with your children.
Yeah, the school I've just finished in, the teachers still go out to the playground and bring them in every day, and I really like that. I mean, I hated it in the rain. It wasn't my favorite thing to do then, but you would always be like, oh no. But it's really nice. Just you're going out, you're meeting them out there. we were all going in together, which was really nice. Once you're in there, you've got all your usual things to do. You're registered and your lunches and trying to organize that. I'd say from as very young as possible, making that as independent an activity as possible, having that soft start morning where they come in, they self-register, they choose their lunch. Where I was teaching, by choosing their lunch, that was them registering themselves because you could see that they were there, and then I could just quickly do any updating of admin. Had activities set out around the room just in the spaces that were available, or things that they know that they come in further up the school, they knew they came in and they got whatever it was they needed to get out their tray or out of a certain area of the classroom. And it's just a case of keep doing it until they know that that's what they do when they come in the morning. And with your younger ones, see if you need to practice it. Or if
a number of times I've practiced that first week, we practiced lining up. Let's practice lining up, one behind the other. You know, in a line, we are quiet, we are one behind the other, and our hands are to ourselves. The number of times the kids say that over and over. We are quiet, we are one behind the other, and our hands are to ourselves.
And it just feels sometimes like we're teaching you how to suck eggs. You know all this, but it's just, you'll forget because you're so excited about getting your own classroom and your own space that you just sometimes will expect children to know that, or they might have had a teacher the year before with a very different teaching style from you, and it's just about giving everyone time to get used to each other. And
I used to get them to practice as also for your really young children who are not, because the nurseries are so different now in comparison to what they used to be. There's a lot more free choice in the nursery, so coming into a primary 1 class can feel really daunting for children when there's a lot more structure to it. So I used to practice, as I said, lining up, how to sit on the carpet, transitioning from the tables to the carpet and then back to the tables, transitioning around different spaces in the room. If we were doing like a structured activities, that we would move round from one table to the next, like how you would carousel around the activities. Toileting is another big one. They come in the morning, where do they hang their coat? Where did they put their bag? Where did their water bottles go? You've got to forward think all of this as the teacher so that you're making it as seamless as possible for the kids to practice. And then once they're in, they're sat, you're registered, right, let's line up for the toilet. Off to the toilet we go, then we come back and then we do an activity. Then it's right, we're going to go to the toilet again. And it's this constant reiteration and practicing of routines for the young ones that you feel like you spend your entire day just lining up in the corridor, but you are building a strong foundation for the rest of your year.
And I think just as equally with the older ones, if you've got a cloakroom area, for example, that's further away from your classroom, oh my goodness, you've no idea how long it can take some classes to come in, put their stuff away and just be in the room. And you're like, it's 9:20 and we've done nothing. Can we speed this up? And just encouraging that speed. And then having things like classroom jobs where you've got somebody who goes and, well, does the cloakroom look acceptable? Because they'll just chuck things if they have a peg, they'll have all that stuff, but everything's still on the floor. And just having those clear boundaries in place straight away. Well, actually, this isn't acceptable, and this is where it goes. And you need to have it off the floor because otherwise it's not safe, or people's things are getting damaged. And just these things can just be ongoing.
Do you know what's really nice about that? So sometimes you feel like when you're doing that, you're just nagging them constantly. But see if you're picking out the ones that are doing it well, really over the top praise them. You'll be surprised the number of kids that will see that and want that praise as well, and they will then start copying those behaviors rather than feeling like you're nagging at your class, like you've not picked this up, and you've focusing on that positive reinforcement. I'm sure you all know that.
I was going to say, do you know, the thing is, though, I do know that. I know that in a classroom setting, and yet all I do with my own children is nag. You see to sit in this room, that shouldn't be like that. But when I go into a classroom, I can be quite calm about it. It just doesn't need to transfer that into the home environment. I need to figure out how we do that.
That's universal. I have a wee girl who's going to S1 after the summer, and her room, she's away in a residential today, and I've not even looked at the state of the room upstairs yet.
Oh, the joys. And I think the last thing on this bit would be establishing relationships. I'll check if we've had any questions on this part here. I don't think it has been.
It's the best part of the job, is the relationships with the pupils. It's the most rewarding part of the job. You go home at the end of the day and they are your children. you will think about them at the holidays, at Christmas time and Easter. You'll want to give them the best possible educational experience that they can have, because that's why you get into the job. And having those relationships, and when you come in the morning and they want to give you a big cuddle, or they want to come and sit with you and tell you about their day, or you go into the lunch hall at lunchtime, and if you sit down with them, it's like you suddenly become some celebrity, that they just all they're all crowding around you. Those relationships are so special. You are such a big part of these children's lives. And I think sometimes we forget that responsibility, that privilege that we have.
Absolutely. But we're, as I knew would happen with us, we've gone over our time in that section, but I'll keep using. But yes, so theme 3, dealing with composites and mixed ability groups. Now, I said at the beginning, every single classroom that you will ever teach in is basically a giant composite class, because no group of children is at the same stage of their learning journey. You can have a primary 5 class, which will have children still working at early level in certain areas, big chunk of them perhaps still comfortably in first level, and you'll have children who are in second. You could even have children who are starting to push into third level if they have a particular, if they're particularly good at maths or writing stories and that sort of thing. So don't be too stressed if you've been given a composite class. Don't let that be an extra add-on that's giving you stress or tension, because every class you'll ever have will feel like that. So yes, so we were talking about how not to let, if you've been given a composite class, not to let that be something that's really stressing you out.
No, actually, do you know what? Composite classes are actually, if you think about them from the perspective of class sizes, a composite class is actually a win, because your maximum numbers in a composite class is 25, whilst if you're in a primary 7 class, you could have up to 33 children. Yeah. So, and as you said before, that differentiation that is still there within a solid primary 7 class, as it would be with a 6-7, except that your numbers are much lower in a 6-7. So you're actually on to a win.
I love that mindset. Why have I never thought of that before? What a positive way to look at it. Smaller class size.
There's 8 less jotters to mark.
And it does make all the difference as well. And I think with kind of thinking about your children as individuals, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something that you need to be doing in week 1 and week 2. You can't do that until you know your learners, and that's why establishing those relationships is the key thing. Finding out about them, what are their interests, what do they pay attention to the most, when do you grab their interest, when are they the most engaged. And obviously that'll be different for everybody, but just if you're able to pick onto something and use that as a hook for children who maybe are slightly less engaged, then that's obviously going to be a winner. Differentiation can look so different from everything. It doesn't need to be, oh, we're going to be doing this job, we're doing 3 different jobs. It can just be the expectations different. We're all going to be doing the same task, but this group, I only need you to do questions 1 and 2. This group, and do more if you can, is always there. You always want to be adding on that extra challenge. Group 2, you're going to be looking at what this group are doing and also this part of this task. This group, you know that they can do 1 and 2, so there's no point in maybe making them do it again. They're doing the extension activity, but you're all doing the same thing. You don't need to be 3 different maths groups where you're all doing 3 different areas of maths. Yeah. It's just not sustainable.
Don't give yourself that level of work, because as you said, it's not sustainable for the long run. If one group's doing fractions, your whole class is doing fractions. They're just doing it at a level that's more suitable for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that you've got, as you said, don't try and do this at the beginning, because you're not going to know your learners yet. So yes, you will have some planned differentiation in there, but that won't come in until you're further into your term. Something I always enjoyed doing with my upper school was the optional chili challenge task. So they would have their core task, and then they pick the level that is suitable for them. So you would have your red, amber, green, and they can choose. Usually I would say, well, everyone does the amber task, and then you can pick if you want to do a red one, if you want to go down to a green one, you can choose that. Adaptive learning is something, I think it's like a buzzword that people use now as part of differentiation. And the way that I see adaptive learning is it's more in the lesson ways that you differentiate. So for example, we're talking before about community supplies, having that area set up in your classroom. If you have children who are maybe struggling with something, and what did I just do? I've just clicked something.
I don't know, your face. There you are.
Do you know what it is? I waved my hands around and suddenly it said, do you want to use hand gestures? I'm like, no, I don't. No. But if you're doing a maths lesson, and a quick way of adaptive learning would be to have those resources out for the children. They choose what resources they want to use to support them with their learning. That's adaptive learning, and that's something that you could detail on your plans that you're using. I do think that it's really important that you have lots of ways that you're catering to the different needs and abilities of your children. I'm sure a report came out not that long ago that the rate of ASN within mainstream primary schools is on the rise. So it's important that you're thinking about that and how you are adapting your lessons to suit the individual needs of the children in front of you. That long gone are the days of, we're doing the one lesson, everyone's doing the same lesson, and this is my differentiation, X, Y, and Z. You really have to be adapting as you go and knowing your children. That's why community building is so important.
Absolutely. And I think as well, making it the norm to go and use these things, to go and collect them, so that nobody's feeling isolated or left out, that they need to go.
No child should be like, oh, you can't use an overlay because you don't have dyslexia. No, if they want to use an overlay, let them use an overlay. Have them all out on display that in different colours, and any child can go and choose one. Have your cubes and your 10 frames, all of that out, so the children can go up and use as and when they want. And then there's no stigma attached to them using them either.
Yeah, and having like your 100 square grids and these things, I used to have them like in the centre, like everyone's got their basket with all their supplies, and making these tools as regular as having your pencils and your pens and your things, everything that used to be there. Put in these learning aids and these adaptive learning tools that are going to make their life easier, and also it gives you more of a chance that you're not continually having to go and get things for children. That's those first few days is where will we put this, or does that work there, or you'll have set up your classroom all summer and then all of a sudden you're like, that doesn't work, because when they're putting their water bottles there, nobody can access it, and you're like, you'll move things about a million times, and that is fine until everybody is comfortable and you know what's happening. Label, and
with pictures.
Yes, exactly.
Everything with pictures. Don't just rely on the writing. Make sure everything, if you're putting labels out, make sure everything has got an icon on it or a picture. A lot of schools use widget software now as part of the communication friendly journey that they do. So that's usually available. You don't have to go and purchase that or find it anywhere. It's usually available, and it's consistency through the school. And I would also say that as well with your visual timetable. If you have a visual timetable, which is, I would say, is usual standard practice now in a primary school, in fact any school, is to have that visual timetable with all the icons, and the icons usually match in with everything else that's going on in the school.
And shameless Twinkl plug, because I haven't really done much of that yet, but shameless Twinkl plug, we have Twinkl symbols, which is part of your any subscription that you have anyway. So it's useful to have because it's very similar to the widgets, and if your school doesn't have access to that, then using Twinkl symbols is an excellent way to do it as well. But just having these, knowing that these things are there, having things like the desk mats and things that I was talking about, your 100 square grids and everything, a lot of these are available just to quickly download. But I'm not here to talk about Twinkl. I am here to talk about your things like that. So,
on another note as well, if you do have children with additional support needs in your class, most likely those children will already have child's plans or IEPs, and they'll be passed down to you from the previous teacher. And don't worry if you're getting past, say, 6 or 7 child's plans. Your head teacher or your deputy head or your mentor will go through them with you, so that you understand what's on those plans and how those plans are to be adapted. Because I think it's every 6 months. I want to say it's 6 monthly. A child's plan is to be. I'm not going to actually say that because I don't. I think I might be guessing that. The child plans have to be reviewed because they're legal documents, but your head teacher or your deputy head or your mentor will go through that with you so that you know exactly what the needs are of those children and how the learning is to be adapted for that child.
Excellent. And we've just had a question put in, and I think it's definitely more aimed at me, and it's saying that their local authority doesn't allow for colour photocopying, which is becoming the norm in a lot of places. So just asking if these things are available with like an outline format, so they'd be coloured in by pupils. Most Twinkl resources, for example, where it's the big green button, but it says download now, underneath there's a bit that says alternative downloads, and you can usually get most of them in dyslexic friendly font. You can get them in black and white. You can get them in eco-saving black and white. There's lots of different options that you can use to download to get round the places that you're not allowed to download in colour. But it's just under the green download now button, the one that says alternative. And if what you need isn't there, you can request an alternative version, and it can be made, and they usually turn them round within, it's very, very quickly. They can change them. If it is a case of making it into a black and white version, it can usually be with you within, I'd say, a day at the most. So don't be afraid to ask for that sort of thing. We've had another question as well. What does the child plans, etc., look like for early years, as most won't have an ASN diagnosis? Again, that will depend on your local authority, what they use, what their plans look like.
A child doesn't always need an ASN diagnosis to have a child's plan as well. It's just something to be mindful of. You can have a child's plan for educational purposes, for health and wellbeing purposes. It doesn't always need to be alongside a diagnosis. You also have children who have diagnosis who have no need of a child's plan as well. They're very much, it's all to do with the child's individual needs and whether that is necessary for the child.
So yeah, and don't be afraid that if you get something through, or if you have a child that you think is going to benefit from it, just because you're new or you don't know what you're doing, speak to your colleagues. And when you do have one, there will be, your past colleagues will have tried lots of different techniques, and they'll know what works for these children. So please make sure you're talking to them. There's no question that they're not going to get annoyed with you because you don't know everything on day one. We've all been there before. We've all come through it. We're all constantly learning. And as the curriculum changes and adapts, we're all still learning. Play-based learning is something that there's so many very experienced teachers who are struggling to implement it, and implement it the way that they want it to feel manageable. So everyone is always, education cyclical, isn't it? Everyone's always learning. So don't feel that you can't ask questions. There are no stupid questions. But I'm going to move on because I know that this is what happens. We keep doing it. Daily structures, routines, planning and assessment, a big one. So timetables, non-class contact time, different forms of planning, tracking and monitoring, formative and summative assessments, and assessment calendars. I think if you assessment calendars, you can't do anything about that. That is put in place by your local authority or the government, depending on what ones we're looking at. Depending on the class stage that you get, will already dictate that for you.
You're going to get a lot of that thrown at you on your in-service day when you go in for your either one or two, and for me it's 2 in-service days. Some authorities it's just 1, but you're going to get a lot of that jargon thrown at you on your first day. And essentially the calendar for assessment, it just plans out your year as to say, this is when certain parts are due, for like tracking and monitoring is due, where you have to put in interim levels for your children. This is when we do moderation. This is when the SNSA is done. So it's a big piece of work, but it's not anything that you have any control over. It's just more awareness of it and what it is.
So keep that bit that you get given on your first day. Don't lose that bit of paper.
There's nothing worse than someone turning around to you and saying, have you done your tracking and monitoring yet? It's due on Friday. And you go, no, not yet.
That one. And of course, every school and every local authority, their planning looks different as well. So we're not going to sit and tell you the best way to do it, because we can. I've only worked in Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire, so I have no idea how Glasgow City's planning looks. It's just not something that we can plan, and it would be lovely if everywhere did something very similar, because you might be moving to a new place. You might have been doing some your placements near your university, and now you're moving somewhere else in Scotland to start in a completely new local authority, and that can seem daunting, but there's plenty of support in place to help. I think with your thinking back more about your planning, because it's how you're planning things that's going to feed into these assessments anyway. So I don't know, just making sure that you're aware of when these assessments are due and that what you're working towards, and making sure that everybody knows the point.
I would say as well that your planning, especially your daily, weekly planning that's done, that planning is for you. So here I'm going to do my EIS plug now as well. So if you're not already part of a union, please go and find yourself a union to join. It's really important. They're there for your protection. They're there to make sure that you're looked after. You never know when you're going to need the union. No one ever plans to need the union, but it is really important that they are there to protect you and your interests. But one thing that is really has come from that is that your planning that you're doing, your daily and weekly planning, that planning is for you. It doesn't have to follow any particular standardized format. I know at uni everyone has like the standardized format that they use, but it's whatever works best for you, if that would be daily or weekly. The level of detail that you're putting into that, as long as a supply teacher can come in and pick up your plans and run with them, they're good.
Excellent. And be aware, you'll never plan a lesson as detailed as you've been doing in your university career so far. I used to love my file at university. I really did. It was huge. Before we did the electronic files, it was a proper big ring binder. It was all color coded, and I loved that file. I think I still have it in the attic because it was so many hours worth of work that I can't bear myself to part with it. And it's there'll be a lot of dust on it now. It's very old, but but I think as well, using your mentor meetings and your time out of class, so you'll get your non-class contact time, but you'll also get your probationer time. Use that wisely, especially.
And again, it's time and place. So you're entitled to take your non-contact wherever you see fit. Just another EIS.
Another one there as well. But I think it's really important in the earlier on in your time. You'll spend the first term really wanting to get to know your class and knowing what you're doing. Towards the very end of the year as well, there's lots to do and lots to finish up. Try and use that middle few terms to visit as many classes as you can. Go and watch your colleagues teach. If you can get into other schools and watch other probationers teach, if you're within a cluster and you can get out and about, then I think that it's so important and so useful to use that time to try and see as many different teachers teach different stages. If you are in primary 1, 2 or 3, try and go and visit upper stages, or equally go and visit how they're maybe doing it differently in a different school. And yes, you'll have other things that you need to do which are very important, but it's important for your career to get that understanding and that experience for you as much as you're there for your class as well. So there are certain times of year where it's easier to do than other times of the year. Christmas, that's pretty impossible. And I know that's that middle time of year where I told you to do it, but the closer you get to Christmas in a primary school, things just become impossible. Timetables go out the window.
After October.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're doing nativity, that starts after October.
Yeah, so and it's all about flexibility, and we've always known that as teachers, being flexible is absolutely key. Having a timetable set up, you'll have to sign up quite quickly for times for when your class is going to the hall and times where that is, and just be aware of when that's going up in the staff room. Don't be afraid to ask. Look carefully at your planning. If you have primary 1 or 2, try and get an afternoon slot, because your morning time is your core teaching time or your core learning time with them, whether that's through free play or if you do have more teacher directed inputs, but you're going to get more out of that age group in the morning than you are in the afternoon. You're going to get that out. All stages will learn better in the morning, but it's much harder to do that sort of thing with older classes. If you've got a library time, just think about when that's going to be, and just if you need to change things, be flexible. And you'll be told how many hours of certain subjects you have to do and that sort of thing, but just be flexible. Things will change at the drop of a hat every time you come in. So just think just being prepared for that. But yeah, I'd like to go on to questions because we do only have 10 minutes left. We can keep talking about different types of assessment and things that you like doing, but please feel free to start putting questions in. We've just had one about when completing planning. Oh, it keeps jumping down when I start reading it. When completing planning, long-term or short-term, where did it go? Medium term, is this done with your mentor, stage partner within the first week or so? Definitely not within the first week. Everyone's needing time to get back in and kind of know what they're doing. You might also be in a school that doesn't have a stage partner. You might be sort of on your own, which isn't, you still got your mentor, so they're still there to help you. Schools will tell you whether this is done online. Some schools still like a paper format, but that is, I would say, more on its way out. It is going more online, which is what you want. Well, I think it's easier. What do you think, Donna, when completing your stage partner?
I'm in a school where, like you're saying, there's no really stage partners. We usually run composites all the way up. We do work collaboratively, but your planning is really, it is your planning. Again, every school will be different, but the way my school runs is that we have what's called a backdrop plan, which is done for the beginning of the session, so that you can see what outcomes are being covered at each stage across the school. As I said before, you're not expected to cover every single outcome every single year. It's absolutely impossible, especially when you're talking about second level maths and literacy. You're never going to cover every single outcome every single year. So from that backdrop plan, you've got your range of outcomes that you need covered. You then create medium-term plans. We have a pro forma that we use in my school for a medium-term plan, and as you said, it's done on a computer. They're saved in a central drive, and they can be saved and then reused for the following. If you're moving stages, it means that you've got a set of plans that another teacher has done that you can then use and pick up. It was one of the things that we did when we were talking about, do you remember before COVID, and they gave us an extra in-service day to look at workload planning? That was one of the things that my school did, was creating these pro forma for plans. But those are your medium-term plans, and then from that you then just do your daily or weekly plan. Yeah. But that's just my school. My school, every school will be different.
Yeah, well, the school I was just recently in Aberdeenshire worked within its cluster, and so each the cluster had got together. So that's like the group of primaries that feed into the secondary school. So they'd all got together and had split it up, and it was in a 3-year rotation for the outcomes, which was, I'd never seen it done that way before, and I thought it was quite interesting, and it worked well in the year I was there. And it just meant that if you do end up with composites and stuff, or if you're mixed classes, that it was a 3-year progression for that mix, and usually the levels are within that 3-year progression as well, so it worked quite nicely. But yeah, that'll depend on your local authority. One for you that's come up through, oh, hang on, where are we? It keeps disappearing. Donna, what was the name of the children's right book you mentioned for younger children?
I think it's called We All Have Rights, or it's from the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland. Sorry, my sister keeps phoning me, which keeps binging me off here. So if you go on to Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland, or CYPCS, early level rights book, and it should come up. There's a PDF copy that you'll be able to get online for free, and then if you'd rather have a solid copy, you can. That's the one. Let's Explore Our Rights. Thank you very much. That's the one.
Just Googling in the background trying to find.
No. Someone put it up in the chat there. That's the exact book I'm thinking of. Someone's better than I am. I knew what I was talking about. But that's where it's from. You can get a PDF copy online, or you can request to have one sent to your school if you want a solid copy, and they also do it in Scots language.
And I think you said the older book was called Dream Jar, did you say? Yeah.
No, the older book's called The Name Jar.
The Name Jar. Sorry. And again, another one for you. Donna was talking about not doing too many assessments during the first week. What would happen if you didn't get a handover and you don't have data for that group? I think that would be a very rare occurrence. I would ask. I would ask. It's got to be in the school somewhere.
Your mentor will meet with you very early on, usually probably in the in-service day. There's always an in-service day in the August, so you'll get a day at least where there's no children. And in that time, I would ask for that information. If it's not given to you, ask.
And if you do have the opportunity to visit your class before, the last few times I've done mentored probationers, I would also have organised them to come in at a time, whether they were coming in between break and lunch. I would have sat with them over lunchtime and done as quick a handover as I could, or come in the afternoon, and I would have happily stayed behind. And you'll find most teachers are willing to do that, because they're going to have a handover, even if they're not having a probationer taking on the class. But if you do get the time to meet with somebody beforehand, and
that data will definitely be there, though, because every school, I mean, I know in my authority, and I'm pretty certain it's for every authority across Scotland, they have to submit that data to their local authority of how many kids are on track, how many kids are exceeding, how many kids are not on track. So that data will be sitting centrally within your school, because they've had to submit that to their local authority. So it will be there. You may just, hopefully they would just give it to you. But
yeah, I would think it'd be quite rare for you to be left without anything at all. But we've only got a few minutes left, and I just want to take this time to thank Donna so much for coming along. Please, if you have any other questions, we are available all the time on Twinkl Scotland's social media. So it's myself and 3 other teachers that run that. Donna is one of our ambassadors, so follows a lot of the stuff that we're doing anyway, and tends to jump on and answer questions too. And some of the other people that I mentioned earlier do that too. So please make sure you follow at Twinkl Scotland on Instagram, TikTok. That's more a bit of a fun one than anything. But TikTok and Facebook, we've got the Facebook group. We've got the Facebook page and also Facebook group, so you can ask more in-depth questions. I'll try and put up lots of different things tonight to help as much as I can.